40 to 40 is a blog and podcast hybrid project looking back, living in the now, and pondering on the future as Raymond Nurse turns 40. Each blog or podcast episode will feature topics beginning with F, such as foundation, family, financials, frenemies, and much, much more.
All right. Raymond, the journey continues. 40 to 40 podcast episode for us. I believe it's number 7. And our theme for today is 14. So usually start us off with your first 5. What are your first 5 of the day?
So my first 5 for today, the last blog episode would have been focusing on familiarity, and it was written while in Barbados. I'm making it a habit at this point because it's the second time I've been writing something with the privilege of being at home and just being in the streets you grew up on, being able to interact with people. I had this lovely interaction with a lady that she used to sell snacks and everything right outside of my primary school, Bernadine. And she glowed me up a bit because she was talking about she remember my smile from when I was a little boy and how it hasn't changed. And yeah, it felt good to not just be at home, but to be around people that you're familiar with. In the blog last week, I would have written about the good, the bad, and the indifferent with familiarity. And the focus when I was at home was a bit of the good. A couple of days ago, we had a bit of the bad and the indifferent, where I was on a site and this dude, the interesting thing about the job I do right now is I am a bit out of what I would say white America is familiar with in terms of my station on a construction site. On a construction site, I am more likely to be seen as the person sweeping and cleaning, dealing with garbage, like laboring and lifting windows and doors around or whatever the case may be. And I find it very interesting now that I am doing a job where I'm taking photos. So I got this big red and black camera. And this dude, the last time that I was out on site, John was off to the races, fully livid, going crazy. Like, what are you doing? Who are you? And all kind of thing. And so for me, I'm trying to get him to just bring it down because again, he sees me and he immediately is familiarizing himself with something sinister. While for me, it is just a professional trying to do a job, And so unfortunately, on that same day, I had 2 incidents, one with him and one with an off-duty manager at TJ Maxx. And it just continues to remind me that the familiar and the good vibes or whatever you might be accustomed to, you really gotta just be wary of how the world is viewing you because this man was wild, And so yeah, for my first 5, it's just a matter of, trying to associate yourself and associate people and places with hopefully something positive. When you think about the familiar, think about something good and not something bad or indifferent. So that's it for me for the day.
You talking about that made me think about just something I saw on Instagram yesterday, which was J. Cole was in a Tesla store and he was touching and looking at one of the cyber trucks and he had thousands of dollars in his book bag, because he was ready to, I guess, do his thing that day. And because of the way he was dressed and the fact that he was a black man and these folks inside did not know who J. Cole was, when he touched the truck, they tried to hurry him out of the store. And, J. Cole is very calm, very chill, very relaxed. He left. And it was just like, that's so crazy that you would treat this man this way just because he's a black man, not knowing who he is, his stature, and his net worth. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
He can buy everything in this freaking store, including possibly you.
He could buy everybody in their Tesla.
Yeah. So it's just, definitely unfortunate that obviously even in 2024, we still deal with it to the extent that we do. But I wanted to ask you to piggyback on that too. When you talk about familiarity and you talk about being at home and spending time at home, do the circumstances and situations you find yourself in America ever make you be like, I'm over this, I'm going to go back home? Let me go back to the motherland.
Every day in almost every way. So I now that I am able to go home more, first the first thing would have been I went from just this joy of having the flexibility to be at home pretty frequently now. And now I am in this phase where 2 weeks isn't enough time. And so now I'm like, I want to stay for 3, and then I know I could try to squeeze out a 4, a 6, and but no, all sport aside, I'm seriously thinking about how do I make certain moves while I'm here that they financially set me up for a future back in the Caribbean. Especially in this last month, 2 months, I've had quite a few run-ins more than usual. And I'm really, really looking to focus a lot more of my brain power and the time I have to figure it out. Like before I was like, yeah, America's home, you're gonna rock with it. But now I'm like, yeah, but America's home for like 7 more years. Like
Before you know it'll be one more year, because Mama Wendy, I hear you rejoicing because this is exactly what happened to me. Now, granted, I am born and raised in the US, but I've been away from my hometown, right? And I reached a point where even though I was able to be back for weeks at a time, it was like I still feel like I'm catching glimpses of my friends and family's lives and
Mhm,
not being able to live my day-to-day life with the people that I love. So I do think there comes to a point that familiarity calls you
mhm.
home.
Oh yeah. And it
So,
it is calling me.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mama Wendy, I hear you, girl. All right, let's get into some of the other topics you have laid out for us today. So, this is really supposed to touch on your teenage years going into your undergrad years in college. So, you mentioned coming into your own and figuring out who you are. What was that process like for you?
I think losing my dad at a young age, lost him at 8, that made me kind of think about stepping up to the plate and being a little older, more accepted responsibility and everything else. Yes, you're still a child, but there's this aspect of now that my grandmother lost her son, and as that, I guess, kind of direct descendant, how can I try to slot in and not have her miss him that much? For my secondary school years, yeah, you would be enjoying your teenage years and everything else, but still you were heading home and you're thinking about how to be a Whitfield. That would have been my dad's name, how to be a Whitfield in the eyes of my grandmom, and in some ways, to a lesser extent, his siblings. I wouldn't say I necessarily grew up fast because I was still very much teenage boy, immature and wilding, but definitely would have been a situation where the thought process was a bit further along in terms of where the usual thought process for someone that age would have been. Class clown and on the surface you're having a good time, but then internally there's a lot more thinking about your place and what lane you kind of want to go down in life. And when you toss in church, being active in the church, and then being exposed and tossed into the world and trying to figure out how to balance the two. How wild can I be? How much will God forgive when the day of judgment comes around the
Ooh,
corner? Not
Lord.
that, yeah, not I wasn't and that's the thing. Like even my mom,
Raymond and got into some things.
I wasn't a wild child by any stretch of the imagination, but I was wild to me and how I was raised. But if you pull up my dossier and compare my dossier to another 14, 16, 17-year-old boy, my dossier might be light. But
You
from
mean the book of
where
life, the book of life that God is judging you by?
correct. But from where I would have come from to that moment, it would have been heavy for me. Coming into my own was just figuring out a mixture of, yeah, what works, what doesn't work, like who you are, where do you want to be in life. I would say for me, definitely more, it was definitely more along the side of trying to be a good person and less along the lane of trying to excel in my studies and that kind of thing. Because the school I went to was a high performing school, and yeah, I was just like, whatever. School sucks. School isn't cool, that kind of way.
Well, this is a good transition into your graduation from high school. So we are literally like in the season of graduation. You see the signage everywhere. You see everybody in their
Mhm.
caps and gowns. So cute. Yay, congratulations, class of 2024. Do y'all think? What was that experience like for you? What traditions did you guys have when you graduated from high school?
For me, when graduation came around, I am coming from a lower middle income household, but the school I went to had a lot more upper middle and upper class households attending the school. So graduation for some would have been a pretty big deal. For me, it wasn't that much of a thing. And it wasn't that much of a thing to the point where when my mom finished secondary school, she went straight into working. And so she didn't get that opportunity to do a whole heap of tertiary education in those kind of teenage, early 20 years. She did some formal education later on in life. So I'm in a household where there's not that much of an emphasis on what do you do after you graduate, how the graduation day is supposed to be. So their pride is there, you've completed your mission, but the reality is like the glitz and the glamour, that side of things doesn't really exist. And so my girlfriend at the time of graduation, she is in a group that is more upper middle class, upper class, and it's a big deal for them. So I kind of was pulled along for this ride, and I had a suit made. The bottoms of the pants were way too big, and it's like I look back at them like, I wish it was a proper fitting pants because I would have loved to wear it after, but
Oh,
we
we know
came
you
out to
like
the
tight fitting pants these days, so I can
yeah,
only
like
imagine. But there was an era. I mean, baggy pants have come back for some,
yeah, yeah.
but it was definitely an era.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And so yeah, you had the suit made and it had like that kind of Nehru neck, kind of like preacher suit. So I was looking real fly. And we had the graduation ceremony itself. Then we left from the graduation ceremony to go over to where the reception was. And I went in a limo, and this is the first and the only time I've ever been in a limousine in life. So, like, it was some amount of money. We split it across evenly. But for me, if I was left to my own devices, there's no limo. I get a drop over to where the reception is by some family member, rock on a party and everything is everything. So that would have been the evening where you're getting a bit more exposure to what the haves, like how they go about doing their things. But on the graduation day itself, the deputy principal, Mr. Maynard, I might have been flogged a few times in secondary school and might have gotten up to some mischief. And Mr. Maynard, he was one of the reasons why, as you know, you're finding yourself, he was one of the reasons why I actually ended up settling down and focusing a bit more on school than I probably would have. And he had a proper intervention. So on graduation day itself, everybody going up and friends cheering and all of this jazz. So Mr. Maynard, he shook my hand, he gave me the little school leaving diploma. He said, Raymond, I'm very proud of you. Then I tell you, that day hit me deep inside, and I'm like, mm. And so it was at that point where you kind of think, all right, this is an opportunity. This is a chance you've had to do better. So don't squander it. Even after graduation, my friends, they had these big plans. What they're gonna do, what they're going on to study, what universities they're going to. I was just chilling. I didn't really have much plans that kind of way. Just know, well, based on the talent I have in this arena of intelligence, I should go on to do more in school. So graduation was nice. Yeah, graduation was a good time for sure, especially with Mr. Maynard bigging me up.
Very, very nice. Nothing like some encouragement as you're
Yeah.
moving in such a major time from, I mean, I guess one could say you kind of get to prolong adolescence when you go to college because you don't have quite
Mhm.
the same reality shock you have if you just go straight into the workforce, but you
Yeah.
know, it's transition time. So you chose architecture as your
Mhm.
major to maintain a relationship you had.
Right. So the same relationship I was in coming out of secondary school, it was a bit complicated. And the only way we had a chance to be together was if we left Barbados. So we had this big plan. Well, the plan was I was a bit of a romantic back in the day. So the plan was for me to figure out something that I can do in the country that she was going to study based on the subjects that I had done. So she already had in her mind she's going on to do medicine and, family had multiple doctors within it and everything else. But me, I was playing dominoes, I was playing field hockey, I was chilling. I just usually did enough to get through in school based on the subjects I had done. The fact that my aunt Yvette, she had introduced me to AutoCAD and this kind of thing, I found out that, okay, she looking to go to Jamaica. I gonna go to Jamaica to study. And because of how the University of the West Indies was structured, you could get everything that you do in Jamaica. You could do it in Barbados or you could do it in Trinidad at no tuition. So I had to find a degree in Jamaica that had to be paid for me to get there. Because if I look at my mom and I'm like, yeah, mom, I'm going to do management studies in Jamaica, my mom is going to be like, you stupid? We got management studies at Cape Hill in Barbados. You don't need to expense yourself. You don't need to pay money you don't have. So architecture was that kind of middle ground. So I went up there to pursue architecture. She actually ended up doing an extra school year back in Barbados. And in that year apart, we didn't work out. So I was stuck in Jamaica studying architecture after trying to find a solution to make this thing happen. And yeah,
Wow.
that's how I got into architecture.
Wow. So at any point were you like, hey, maybe I should lean into or focus on something else? Like, was there ever a time where you had any desire to do anything else career wise?
So funny enough, career wise, I always wanted to be a chef.
It's never
Like
too late, Chef
it is true.
Boyardee. It's never
It
too.
it is true. So the middle ground that I came up with was all right, you're doing this architecture thing, you started it, it's costly enough, you got to finish it. If you finish it, at some point in your life, you're going to have a friend who's going to want a restaurant designed. And when your friend comes to you and they want the restaurant design, you're going to have a successful enough career in architecture that you're going to pay to get a little corner, have a private kitchen, and you could entertain your friends and your family. So that was my middle ground, and that was the solution for, well, you start this architecture thing, you got to finish it, but you really want to be a chef. But since then, I have seen how stressful being a chef actually is. And just for like health reasons, I don't think it ultimately would have been a profession that would have done well to me and my body, just with my heart and everything else. So I think, everything happens for a reason. I will continue to hold out that I was going to be like this top chef and people from all over would have been rocking with my food. But
Well, the thing is, though, I mean, it can look so different now, right? It's not like you would have to just work in a kitchen and serve customers in that way. You could be somebody who preps meals and delivers it for people. You could be, I mean, there are options. There are so many other options now in terms of how you can make that work and what that could look like. You could choose to just do events. You could choose to just do catering. Like, I'd say don't give up on the dream. I know you. We've been friends for a long time at this point. I feel like you still enjoy cooking. So if it still calls to you to serve people in that way, I think you should. Right, universe? We're going to manifest it on the podcast today. All right. So this time that you went and thought you were following the love of your life to Jamaica, obviously you were leaving home for the first time as a 18-year-old young man. How did you navigate being away from home for the first time?
Being away from home was actually, it was pretty easy, as bad as that may sound. Sorry to everybody who might think it should be otherwise.
Well, there's also an ignorance in youth. Sometimes I think it's harder the older you get, the more set in your ways you get than when you're younger.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the biggest challenge for me was understanding that Jamaica and just the culture and the way the country is and the way the people are, that it is extremely different to Barbados. Well, it used to be different. I think with the internet and with access to information, I think there are a lot more similarities and parallels. But when I went down there, it definitely was an entirely different culture for me. And that was a huge culture shock because you grew up thinking it's one Caribbean, we're pretty similar, just different islands. You get on a plane, you go to another one. But the Jamaica that well, sorry, let me put that differently. The Raymond that landed in Jamaica early days versus the Raymond that left Jamaica were two different Raymonds. So there's a lot of growing up, there's a lot of being aware of the differences, the nuances, and the culture that I now live in. And I started to get very Jamaican in many ways. They're a lot more assertive, a lot more forward, and a lot more go-getting than Barbadians. We tend to be a bit more relaxed and laid back in our temperament. While I was there, I started to be a bit different. So there would be vacations when I come back to Barbados and I full hike and I just like ready to pop off, and anybody look at me the wrong way is like, what? But it really just came down to having to exist within the culture and to succeed within it. I credit Jamaica to this day with me being able to represent myself and articulate what works and what doesn't work for me in a way that if I had stayed in Barbados during my late teenage years, early 20s, I probably would not, to the extent that I am today, I probably would have developed differently and been a bit more docile and shrug shoulders, turn the other cheek, that kind of way. So the biggest challenge definitely would have been culture shock and the differences between how the societies operate. But outside of that, yeah. And plus too, I was going home every, Christmas. It's not like I was away for many, many years on a stretch. It was cool. My mom, she definitely struggled with me being away more than I did. We came to words once or twice because of it. She would call me way too early in the morning. And so Jamaica was an hour back. And you see how I love my mornings, waking up at 6
I
on
was
the
gonna
dot,
say, if she
like
called
clockwork.
you way
She's
too
calling me at
early,
5.
bro,
So she's calling me at 6 Barbados, which is 5 Jamaican. And so I would be like, Mom, it is 5 o'clock. I am sleeping. I can talk to you later. And this one time she was like, I'm not gonna call you. But she went like a week or 2 weeks. So she was vexed, done with me. She went
oh,
like a week or 2 weeks without calling me. But yeah, it was a fine transition for me. It wasn't too horrible.
I cannot be reached at 5 a.m. I'm not that friend. My phone is on silent. So speaking of Christmas, Christmas break, New Year's, I see some notes about partying and
Mhm.
ringing in the new year in style. What is that about?
Every new year, and this comes back to the life, I guess the new life and the church life. You're in the church for all years and you ringing in the new year, in church, happy new year, all of that jazz.
Do
But then
they
it's,
shoot in the Caribbean or not? Do people shoot in the air the way they do
oh,
here?
you mean like guns?
Yes.
Barbados, no. It's actually quite difficult to get a firearm to be licensed with a firearm in Barbados. Jamaica, I am not sure if they do it for New Year's, but I have been out in parties and a big tune play and a gunfire off in the sky. So I can see where it might occur in some places in Jamaica. But for the most part, no. It's not, to me, it's not a well known and widely practiced thing.
Oh, I don't like it, but it just you talking about New Year's, it made me think of that. It was just an aside. Please
Yeah,
continue.
when you good. When you say shoot, I thought you meant like fireworks. But yeah, no, definitely not. So for us, it would have been you start the year in the church, you start the year watching fireworks somewhere, you start in a party. We had this unique tradition throughout secondary school from the time I was maybe 14 or 15. We would go down to a beach, have a bonfire, roast breadfruits, hot dogs, burgers, grill, all of that. When the clock turned 12, we would watch the fireworks from all the hotels and all the tourist spots. So you're on the coast and you get in 3 or 4 different sets of fireworks all along there. So you're getting everything they're getting at a relatively more palatable entry entry price. And so that would have been how the new year was. Then there would have been the tension and the push and pull where mom wanted me to bring it into church. And I'm like, yo, my friends doing this. So there were some years where you would start in the church, rush to get to the West Coast to the beach where they were to get the fireworks and everything because a lot of the hotels were on the West Coast. Then you would hang out there until about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Then you would rush from the West Coast of the island to the East Coast of the island to watch the first sunrise. And so it was a lot of movement, but it really always was an amazing, and you wishing all your friends all the best, and you rise in the sun and you getting to see who made it across to the east from who didn't. So it was always that you would leave from there. Eventually, it evolved into leaving from there to go get breakfast together. So it was always a really nice way to start the year. That I missed the whole heap. But the first Christmas, when I would have been home from my studies, I had a semester, living on your own. Well, I had a housemate, Hassani. So living in a situation where it's Hassani and myself, we would go partying stupid hours in the morning. You're coming home and all of this jazz. Then to come back home for the Christmas holiday, and mom is like, "Where are you going?" And when I start to get ready at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, and it's like, "I'm going in the club." She's like, "In the club? What's the club?" Like, "Club at Stream." I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, "You know what? She don't know what I'm doing when I'm in Jamaica. She can't control what I'm doing. She just want that if I'm under her roof, I let her know when I'm heading out." And I said, "All right, cool, no problem." As the nights would go on, I'd be, "Hey, mom," touching the road, and boom. But there was this one night I told her, "Hey, I'm heading out." Wendy, nurse is out cold, fully comatose. I come home and it's not till we sitting down having breakfast and I had the party band on my wrist. She said, "Wait, you went out last night?" I said, "Yeah, mom. I tried to wake you up. Tried to tell you I touching the road, but you just sleeping hard." Because she would always say she don't sleep well when I on the road. I was like, huh, you don't even know I went out and you sleep the whole night? That was pretty much the last. So if I got up and I went to touch the road, and if she's sleeping, that was it. It's like, I leave you right there. So you are none the wiser. And so that would have been how the partying and how the socializing in my later teenage years kind of developed and came about.
A mother's love. All right, we have one last thing to discuss. You gave up music, walked away from, as you put it, being the best saxophonist the world would have ever seen.
Yeah,
Strong words.
so by the time I got into secondary school, music was my best subject. I was up to grade 3 or grade 4 theory with distinctions in Cambridge and was playing the piano and all of this jazz. And it's one of those things where my mother always wanted to play the piano growing up. And so she kind of projected that onto me in terms of her making sure that I did music. I wanted to play the saxophone. I get into secondary school and the music teacher, Mrs. Robertson, every single question and the way that music was done, you did grade 1 and grade 2 at 12, 13, and you did grade 3, grade 4 at 13, 14. So I had already done all of those grades. She would ask the questions. I had all of the answers. And then she kind of silenced me. She's like, "Give somebody else a chance, nurse. Keep quiet. Nurse, not you. Take down your hand." So at that point, I'm like, I got to do over the same material that I've done before. I being discouraged from participating in the class. So it really wasn't enjoyable for me anymore. And I grew out of music and I really, really wanted to play the saxophone. I had the pleasure of watching Arturo Tapin. He's a top saxophonist back in Barbados. Saw him play a couple of times. I saw Kenny G play, and this was all while working with the Jazz Festival growing up. And so I'm seeing these saxophone gurus, and I'm just like, yeah, that is the thing I want to do. But yeah, the dream was crushed during secondary school, and the world will never know my glory.
Never too late, as I said with being a chef, to pick things back up.
I agree with you on the chef one. I would leave I would leave the music one on the side. Like that could stay right where it is.
All right. Well, good stuff. Fun episode. 14, guys. Wraps it up for us. Raymond, take us out with your final words.
My final words would be, for sure, I had a grand time in my teenage years. To this day, I have some amazing friendships, whether it be from school, from church, from playing field hockey, because field hockey was a big part of my teenage years. I would encourage you to go listen to Fitness. A lot of the field hockey aspects of my life I've covered in that fitness episode. So this one definitely would have been more on my development as a teenager, and I wouldn't trade my upbringing for the world. I definitely wouldn't, if I could, I wouldn't go back to try to live any of it over. But yeah, had some really good memories and looking forward to, I enjoy the youngsters, seeing them now at those ages, and seeing my godson and hearing about, oh, he talking to this young lady and getting to see like that giddy in love and all of that jazz, and it's like, yeah, memories. So yeah, for sure, I had a good time then, and I have a good time when I sit back and I reminisce about it all. Happy that chapter is closed, and looking forward to everything else that life is going to throw my way going forward.
All right. Talk to you next time.
Manners and respect.